You may have heard before that there is a time for everything. There is a time to be and there is a time to not be. It is a time to be within time and a time to be without time. The more that you see, know, believe, experience, invoke, enjoy, become a part of, and be oneself. These are all aspects of living within living. There are many systems that create every system. Just the fact that you see out of your eyes is a whole system within your eyes to capture the light. And then there's another system to change the way that it looks, and another system to interpret it, and another system to invoke emotions towards colors and things, and another system to have memories, to know what to do and how to act, and another system that is there to move your body towards or away from things. And there's another system to keep the body, and it goes on and on and on and on. There's always a time, and there's always a time not. It is always inside of or outside of all things. There is the yin and the yang, as well to say it, the light and the dark. None are better and none are worse. They are just purely experiences for you to experience. And when we become polarized, it is a gift, but it is also something that is harmful. We have to see and know that a knot is good because it holds something together firmly, but a knot can be very treacherous if that knot is no longer serving you. It is like a standard. When your standard is something, let's say for an example, must be cooked for 2 hours in order to be good to eat, right? That cooking was over a fire. It needed to be cooked for 2 hours because that got out any bacteria and all of these different things. Now with modern day cooking, if you cook that same thing for 2 hours on a stove, it will do nothing good for you. All of the nutrients will be left out. But if you put it on a low heat and maybe a slow cook, you can cook it for 6 hours. So you have to see that the world is with different systems and different elements to the equation. You can't do the same thing you've always done. It's not literally in pure form, whatever dimension, whatever reality that you're in. You cannot do the same things that your ancestors did. We evolve mentally as time goes on because the brain is within time, and that is what gives us the experience that we get to experience all of the colorful emotions and feelings and the framework of who you were 10 years ago and who you are now, and this sense of safety and security that comes with knowing something by evidence of memory, experience, which is a sense of memory, feelings, emotions. I want you to think of something that really, really triggers you. Like it's something that like makes your teeth clench. And not everyone will have those moments. Some people, it will be their greatest bliss. It's what they live for. So wherever you are on the spectrum, the most powerful emotion that you can feel and think of, the reason that thing irritates you, or the reason that thing gives you the greatest love in your life, is because there's emotion. There are so many things in this world that you don't care about at all. Like if someone put it in front of you, you're like, so? What's this? Like you have this confused look on your face, like what's this? Why is this here? And this person can explain it to you night and day and tell you how fabulous it is, but if you feel no emotion towards whatever that thing is, the feeling, you're not gonna do anything. In fact, the people that have learned to not feel anything about anyone have learned that they just find information about these things and use them to their benefit. Now, this is a positive when it comes to things you don't want to own you and control you, but you also still have to have standards in which you operate with things that don't matter to you. So if it doesn't matter to you that you have porridge for breakfast or a steak dinner for breakfast, it doesn't matter to you. You need to have standards of health. So if you had porridge for breakfast every day, it would not sustain you. You need to find something that gives you the health that you need. So you have to find a different standard then, because you can't afford to go this way or that way. And then when you have the standard, this becomes your new knot. This becomes your new way of living. It is no longer about hunger or what you can afford. It is about healthiness. What is food's essence? It is about feeding your human system. So you have to learn to change and evolve as you learn to change and evolve. And we as humans have done a lot of evolving and a lot of changing, especially in the last 100 years. So even our grandparents, some of them were in war times and they could have nothing more than a teaspoon of sweets. And today you could empty the whole jar and you still have like 6 more jars in the cupboard, and you can go to the store and get more. It's not like it's not available. The excess of things is available to you in so many ways that you have to change the way you think, act, know, and believe. Now, you do have to have a standard, because if you empty an entire thing of sweets into your breakfast, you might have other problems. Possibly. That is up to you to find out, if you wish. But the biggest thing is, when we have a standard, we create a knot. It could be a notch, you could look at it, a notch in the pole. It could be a knot in the rope of where your brain needs to go. Okay, yeah, well, we need to do this. We have this certain formula that we work with things. But you have to understand your ancestors, your elders also had notches. And they also had knots for a reason. And they naturally pass down those things so that you can live the great life that they lived, because they did the best of their ability, whatever their circumstances were. But you live in a completely different world, completely. And then so forth, your offspring or the next generations, they all live in a different world, so they have different standards. So when you learn how to dismantle standards and recreate standards, then this becomes an asset to you as a human being. This is the process of evolution. But the problem is, power requires firm, long-standing standards. And then the next problem is, most people are so shallow that they have to keep their power in a standard that is ancient and no longer is actually the greatest power anymore. And it's no longer serving them, because it's like so far back that you can't, it's so primitive, these power structures, that they've been utilized by the worst of the worst, the goblins of this you know, the vampires are actually smart, but you have to know that there are so many different beings that have taken over these old power structures. So when you go to the main religions and you say, I'm going to find truth there, of course you're going to find truth there, because everything is built on some sort of truth. And the longer something lasts, the deeper the truth was. But it doesn't necessarily mean the knots, the standards, the ways of doing things are going to serve you specifically. And this is why we have to walk out of these long-standing structure systems where you follow a set of rules and check off a list and say, okay, I can do this now. Because when you follow that set of rules and check off that list without knowing why, without understanding how it affects you, then you cut off pieces of your own expression, because you're not creating the bricks that you put in your wall. You're literally borrowing bricks from an old broken down something and putting it in your wall, and then you feel caged in instead of supported, uplifted, and safe. You feel like, well, I have to have this, otherwise all things will come at me. And at the end of the day, there's a deep essence and desire for power from all beings, and this is why people tend to gravitate towards what the masses believe, because then they won't be picked on. And they want to be the person adored, so they won't be rejected. And they want to be a part of the power structure that so many people look up to and value, because they know they'll be safe. You have to know all of these things are within inside of you. And the more that you deeply express all of the unsaid things that you just mentally say, oh, I shouldn't do that, or I should. This is you caging yourself instead of rebuilding the wall. You just take on old systems. And right now, the system that has overtaken so much of humanity is such an old form of living, and people look up to it like, oh, well, that's God. Well, you have to realize the evolution of God herself has changed over time, because people have changed and they know more, and now they need to express themselves. So it's no longer put the pot on the fire for 2 hours before you can eat it, and if you don't do that, you might die. Now that's not the case, because things aren't left out. You don't have meat that's left out for 5 hours before you cook it being, scattered with flies and all of these things. This is not even a thing anymore. So you could probably cook it for 2 minutes and you would be fine. You can even eat rare steaks and you're fine, because first of all, your human biology has evolved in order for you to eat those things, and secondary, we have clean practices. So you have to realize the way that the universal source, which is communicating through me as me, the source of all things, I would rather you say, the source that is out there that I do not know, and there is no face and there is no name. I would rather you say that than say the wrong thing. So if you're uncomfortable with knowing that I am God, then that is okay with you. That is okay with me. Because at least you're asking the source of all things, and you are genuinely asking for the truth. You're not repeating the old patterns of behaviors just because it was a system that worked. Well, there are a lot of systems that work that we all know don't work well. So you have to see how things are. There is an evolution to all things. Nothing is ever the same, other than the fact that it's probably very true that there was a sky and an earth in these old texts and ancient texts. But people didn't move, act, or go about life in any of the same ways. Their life expectancy was not the same. The things they believed were not the same. The practices people as cultures believed in were so primitive, but it worked for them. It does not work today. It is not okay to put a child on a fire and say, we're going to do this so we get more children. That does not work anymore. But that was a actual practice that happened for a long time, and people believed it was true. So you have to see that the evolution of things builds our consciousness, builds our standards as an entire race of humans, the species that we are as a whole, and then separately as the different civilizations that we are. So you, who you are, you have to understand you have standards, you have knots within inside of you, and some of those knots serve you as a firm foundation, and some of those knots have stopped you from expressing yourself as the greatest being that you are. It is my job to help you understand who you are, what you are, beyond this skin that you're in, because even that is a whole thing. How are you this moving being? When you look down at yourself, you've always just known it's yours. But do you really look down and move your body and go, I am doing this? I'm doing this without even thinking about it. I'm just fascinated with my own existence. This is how you are meant to be, fascinated with the fact that all of these systems inside of you are creating who you are. They're recreating your skin. They're recreating your blood. They're recreating your DNA and evolving you. The reason you can go in and ask for a DNA test is because where we go and what we do changes how our body acts. There's a reason you can go in there and find possibly Neanderthal blood. Why is that? Because it's different than what it is today. And in the next 1,000 years, the whole spectrum of DNA is changing again. We have to evolve all parts of ourselves. You create a knot, you work with it until it no longer works. Then you create a new knot. So it's this essence of learning how to weave your own existence and then being okay to pull the entire weave apart and recreate it. The first ways of cloth were a lot more difficult to wear. They didn't have such beauty to them. And then they created new materials and things instead of straw type of things, and it got better and better. And we now have such a wide array of things we can even clothe ourselves with. Knots are no longer the only way to create certain things, but this is the way I wanted you to understand it, because knots can be a standard that you use to climb, like a rope with knots on it where you climb up. But it can also be the thing that makes you not digest your food because your stomach's in knots. You have to understand and know the difference. I'm not saying this is an easy thing. I'm just trying to help you see that everything is always for a time. And then everything is also not for a time. knowing the difference is your intuition. Many used to say wisdom, but more people understand now your intuition, the internal voice within inside of yourself. It's a whisper, it's soft, it's easily ignored, but it's also when you learn to tap in and tune in, you know that will always give you the correct answers. And what that is connected to is the source of all things. And so you can always deeply trust yourself when it's connected to the source of all things only. And your higher self, of course. But if you decide to connect it to other entities and other ways along the way, the messages are going to get skewed. The messages are going to have a lot of knots in them. And you're only going to get certain things. So it's important that your higher self, what you've learned and built a relationship with, is connecting to the source of all things only. And if this is not the case for you, or you do not understand this, then ask for the process. But be prepared, because as soon as you ask, it will be given. And then you will be on that journey, and you will start to see things differently. And it might frustrate you. It might even just, but it's the journey that you asked for. So be careful what you ask for, but at the same time, be glorified in the fact that you can ask for things and know the truth and have the purity within inside of yourself of a clean, powerful connection with the elements that create all of this existence, from this reality to the inner realities and to the things that create all things. It is an honor to be able to share these things with you. And I hope that you utilize it in a way that allows you to see yourself and the source, the purity of all that exists clearly.